why don't you, kind of introduce to everybody who is listening to you for the first time, on what do you do right now at Ameren, what does Ameren do, and what your role entails?
Yeah, sure, David. And Ameren is a Fortune 500 utility, and we serve about 3.5 million give and take electricity and gas. So basically, we keep the lights on, right? So in many ways. So what I do is I lead enterprise shared services. I'm a senior director there, and in my group we have enterprise architecture, and I had a fantastic opportunity to revamp that particular practice, and then resiliency, as you know.
Yeah.
It's very critical for utilities. You don't want your gas or electricity down, right? So resilience
Right.
is very critical. And then I revamped Agile Office. That is another practice in my group, and integration. So I do the my team does all the plumbing, all with various systems and applications on prem, in the cloud, and
Nice.
various things like that. And recently, I was asked to start looking into the testing practice. As you know, it is very critical for a successful
Yeah.
delivery, and we started looking into that one.
I'm guessing you should have at least 400 to 500 people in your team that you're managing right now.
No, I don't. We are very efficient. So, including everybody, I think we're around 170, 180 ballpark.
Okay.
That is where we
Oh,
are
well,
right
that's
now.
well, that's a lot of people to work with too, right? And we'll get into all of that. When we were speaking last time, you mentioned to me, and I wasn't aware of this, that Ameren is actually Fortune 500, even though it just operates in Michigan and there's another, and
We
Illinois,
operate in Missouri and Illinois, and
Missouri, and Illinois.
yeah, that's right. And it is surprising, right? That's what I was telling the other day, right? Just operating in two states, it's still a Fortune 500 company because the number of customers we serve, and it is both for distribution, transmission of both gas and electricity. And
Right,
we
right.
also have some generation, like, we have some coal plants, which we are working on moving away, as well as we have nuclears, quite a bit of gas, and some solar and wind energy generation.
Right. Wow, this is awesome. This is great to know. How was the transition for you coming from like Monsanto Bear to a utility company, and of course the practices that you have to lead, or the way you have to build solutions or work with people, kind of you carry that experience. But in terms of domain itself, what surprised you the most coming into Ameren?
Yeah, uh, utility space is new for me, right? We are all
Right.
like you or anybody else. We are all using utilities, but we do
Right.
not know to the most part how they operate, other than
Yeah.
you pay the bill kind of a thing, right? Uh, eh, Utilities in states, at least, is a regulated industry, meaning
Right.
a particular utility will have a territory where you have rights to distribute electricity or gas or whatnot. So with that, there is a lot of regulation comes in.
Right.
So that is something new. That's a new domain for me, along with how energy works, what kind of technical as well as innovation challenges we may have.
Right.
Some of the critical components, right? Like I was talking about reliability, affordability, and as well as there is a lot of emphasis on green energy now. So those are the
Right.
things I'm slowly getting up to speed.
Right. Right.
From technology side that different kind of challenges, but at the end of it, keeping customers what they need, and giving them a very reliable, affordable service is the bottom line.
Got it. Oh man, that's amazing. So you already spoke about some of the teams that you're leading. Of course, the testing practice is something that you're going to take over, but you were talking about the enterprise architect team.
Mhm.
So maybe talk to us about each of these teams for somebody who's listening for the first time.
Mhm.
What do these functions entail, and how do you keep the integrity of what the business objectives are and drive that with the teams that you work with?
Sure. Basically, like I was saying, there are multiple teams in my organization, and keeping all of these teams in sync is a task on its own, right? We
Yeah.
need to make sure there is a right level of collaboration is going, there is a right level of communication going. So enterprise architecture, as you know, we have enterprise architects, solution architects, domain architects helping the enterprise to
Right.
create roadmaps, create technology strategies, as well as long-term investment planning and so on. So that is
Right.
what this team primarily focused on. We have solution architects which work, they work very closely with these initiatives, right? Projects, large projects. They jump in right from the inception all the way, going into live, right? Production and stuff like
Right.
that. So they
Right.
play a very critical part. And again, I can go on with the resiliency and agile office and so on, but going to the gist of your question, right? How do we keep all of these in sync, right? How do we motivate them and making sure that we are delivering business objectives? I think that is what we focus very much in. um, First and foremost, my methodology is around, you probably heard about this, like autonomy, mastery, and purpose. I think that
Right.
is what I primarily use. That was introduced to me by one of my leaders in previous
Right.
world. So it resonates very well with me. And
Right.
making sure you provide some guardrails and tell them, hey, this is what success looks like, this is what good looks like, and create right expectations and goals. And then don't get into the weeds of what they need to do, right?
Right. Right.
How starts with why, right?
Yeah.
And explain why we need to do certain thing, and then explain them or how it needs to be done in a way that it needs to be aligned, there is right level of collaboration, engagement, and so on. And then give them autonomy, and they make wonders. So I have seen
Yeah.
it again and again. That particular thing works, and works on all cylinders.
That's brilliant. Yeah. I mean, it's in what you kind of shared is also your leadership philosophy, which is, I mean, great for you to kind of share. I think autonomy to architects and developers is really interesting, especially in today's day and age where they want to be creative and they're looking at solving the problem, but at the same time, driving guardrails is important because the business objectives is also something
Yeah.
that you have to drive towards. Right. So that's awesome. So, it's a great introduction to what you're doing right now. Tell me about, let's take it back a little bit, maybe a decade or more back, and how was a young Kishore, excited to get into this field of engineering? Like, tell us a little bit about your beginning of computer science and what led you to move into this direction.
Yeah, yeah, so I'm still young. So I'm still young, Kishore. Okay, just point to be
Yeah,
noted.
yeah. Well, young Kishore, young Kishore.
Yeah.
Well, I'm talking about a 20-year-old Kishore right now. So
I won't bore you with all the different roles in different companies, but I'll touch some of the highlights.
yeah,
I had an opportunity to start on a startup in India,
yeah,
and we were trying to do a Salesforce kind of a CRM solution. It is back in the day, and it's very exciting, right? It's a not a cloud solution, but it's a web solution. We had a lot of good features, and a lot of good customization around it. And I learned quite a bit of, working in that startup, right from how the venture capital investment works, and all 9 years of software development and
right.
customization, sales. So that was really exciting journey. And but unfortunately, that startup did not survive, and that's how I ended up in States. And like you were briefly mentioning, I started with Monsanto. That's a
Yeah,
biotech company. So I was there for about 17 years, did various roles. I also had an opportunity before I moved on to Ameren. I had opportunity to lead part of IT,
right,
and we co-led IT transformation, which is we used to call it IT 2.0,
right,
which is around moving from service-based organization to a product-based organization, waterfall to agile, and then moving to the cloud. It is a fantastic, fascinating journey there. And also, I had opportunity, taking existing applications, move them to mode one and mode two, and move
right,
mode one applications to managed
right.
service partners. So that was all a lot of learning. So basically what excites me at the end of the day is problem solving, right?
Yeah,
That is what the key for any IT guy is, what
right,
kind of problems we solve and how effectively we solve with different tools we have in our toolbox, either it is
right.
technology tools, like right from cloud to region AI, right? All new
Yeah,
stuff coming in. We just
Yeah.
don't want to use the tool for the just for the sake of it, but how do we
Yeah.
use it to solve a business problem and make everybody's life more effective and efficient?
Got it. Yeah. So, what's your perspective on all these different changes that have happened? Like, especially, I know the cloud kind of burst into the scene and everybody kind of adopted to it, but not everybody could move to the cloud immediately because, I mean, there is data specifications on being in
Hmm.
data centers and things like that. Um, did you first encounter, moving applications to the cloud at Monsanto? What was that first project like, and how did you like go about looking at something that's new and saying,
Uh-huh.
well, this needs to be something that we need to be at?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. So even though there is a lot of journey in the cloud, it is still not that old, right?
Right, right,
So I think the first exposure to cloud is where we have one particular application, which is a legacy application at Monsanto,
right.
which brings $1 billion of revenue. So
Wow.
it's a huge application in that terms, right? And it has thousands of users, and it brings a lot of profit to Monsanto, but it was not scaling to the use because
Right,
we wanted to expand it to other countries. Like we started in one country, we are adding more countries to it, so it's adding a lot more users to it.
right,
So that is the situation. So then we said, hey, why don't we start looking into cloud? That is
right,
how we started that. Like anything else, we started with proof of concept, pilot, and rolling out gradually. Like, any monolith, which is so business critical, which brings a lot of revenue to the company, a lot of eyes on it.
right,
We and We were looking for agility, reliability, availability, and cost effectiveness. So
right.
those are some of the principles we were looking. Obviously, cloud checks all of those, right? There is agility because you don't have to wait for your
Infrastructure. Yeah.
infrastructure department to set up servers, which may take its own sweet time. It has a lot of resiliency because you can have multiple regions or multiple ways of doing it. I'm not suggesting all applications need multi-region, but you
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
different ways of resiliency and availability. Again, you can scale up much easy horizontally or vertically. And then cost effective, for sure it is cost effective in short term, and there are some questions about long term. That is a conversation for another day, right?
Yeah.
uh, that is the journey we started with, and we slowly, what we did is we migrated one piece at a time from
Right,
monolith legacy application, and then we did a lot of data synchronization. During this transformation, people had to log into multiple systems to get their user journey finished, but eventually, after a couple of years, it's all moved to the cloud. We
right,
got a lot of awards for doing it, and there's a fantastic user experience, and there were a lot of kudos and everything. It was very well, recognized initiatives. So
right.
then, what we did is took that and replicated multiple times.
Very
So
good.
because we have a path for success, and how do
Right.
we best customize it for future needs?
Yeah. So what I'm curious to know about is a $1 billion project that's on legacy and it's a critical piece. Why did you guys decide that you need to move that one? I'm assuming
Uh-huh.
that you wanted to take on a challenge of looking at the most complex problem first, and if we could do it, then it can be replicated more easily other places. Was that the thought process?
But that's a great question. Even though I said that is the project I'm more excited about, but that is
Yeah.
not where we started, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So we started with internal applications first,
Okay.
and we did the pilots and proof of concepts, like I was talking about, and then we ventured into this one. But
Got it. Yeah.
even when we ventured into this particular mega project, quote unquote, we started with again doing a pilot, and we doing a POC and make sure it fits our needs. What are the
Nice.
different frameworks we need to use? What are the tool sets we need to use? And then expand in a agile way, right? You don't want to do a big bang. You do
Right.
one, or you create a roadmap. You do release one, release two, release three, kind of a thing, and continuous delivery.
Yeah, and this is an interesting point of view that you're bringing. That you are in a position where you also not just have to drive strategy, but you also have to ensure that somebody has the knowledge to move these. And when the cloud really came about at that time, you don't have engineers sitting there who have
Yeah,
certification. Nobody is AWS certified or Google. Even I don't think a certification existed at that time. I mean, I'll have to go and check. But you are actually actively learning and applying. So you have this trial and error, and then you have
that's
your
right.
seniors asking for how's the project moving. And so, how did you
Yeah,
tackle all of that being in that position? Yeah,
yeah, that's a fantastic question, right? It is not as simple as copy paste,
yeah,
right? And most of the transformations we need to look through into three lens, like
yeah,
people, process, technology, like you are briefly mentioning.
yeah.
People aspect of it is there is a lot of change management. It is change management inside IT or digital, and also change management outside digital, and to some extent to the customers too, right?
Right, right,
So that is the first aspect. You need to upskill the folks you have, and also you need to have right level of engagement with some of SI partners to
right,
bring right level of talent to augment what is
right.
happening, right?
Got it. Yeah.
And then the process side, it is not like you just take a old wine and pour it into a new bottle kind of a thing, right?
Yes.
Even though everybody likes old wine, that's a different
Yes.
analogy. So I think you need to look into the processes and make it optimized, or there is a lot of transformation there. Either it is the processes goes into building the application, and also the processes, business processes inside the application. Like for
Right.
example, you need to look into what is the DevSecOps pipeline looks like, what is
Yes.
CI/CD
100%.
looks like, how is
Yeah.
your deployment. Your
CICD.
deployment on prem may be different than what you do in cloud, for example.
Right. Right.
Or like you were talking about the talent on doing those foundational items, like how
Right.
do you do logging, how do you do monitoring, and system health checks and unit testing, performance testing. You touch any of it, it is
Right.
different in a way when you build a cloud application compared to a legacy application, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you need to
Yeah. Yeah.
build those muscles, you need to build that processes, and then you
Yeah.
need to scale them up when you need to expand from one team to, I don't know, maybe 10 teams now.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then how do you scale it and still may be able to reuse them for a new application you're going to build by other teams or so on.
Yeah, yeah. What you just said here is it's such a. I mean, for folks who are listening, what Kishore you're explaining here is a true testament of what it really takes to move legacy applications to the cloud and
Hmm.
to re-architect the application. Like just the amount of things you just shared in the 2 minutes, each of them is a cycle of effort that requires
Yes.
lots of brains, a lot of efforts, and it truly kind of brings the effort that you have taken to put something out. It's not like building a new application. Legacy migration is a big challenge, right? So when you were trying to do this, of course we have compute is easier, right? You need servers. Okay, we have EC2 instance, or we have
Hmm.
instances available. You need network. Okay, we have networking VPC available. What was the biggest challenge in terms of migration? Was it the data? Was it the compute layer? Was it just breaking the entire application into small microservices and have an agile? What did you feel like your team really did well and maybe you struggled with?
Yeah, I think, can I say all of the above?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, we'll take all of them. Yeah.
Yeah, those are all challenges, but some are
Right.
smaller lines than other little bit longer lines, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So I I think the biggest challenge we faced is taking this monolith and
yeah.
breaking into smaller consumable units,
Right,
right?
right.
Because now you need to take a vertical cut, not a horizontal cut.
Correct. Yeah,
If you take a horizontal cut, then it cannot be as much of transformational because you still have a lot of dependencies and everything like that. And then our challenge is around when you do a vertical cut, how do you synchronize the data?
yeah.
So
Right,
we
right,
went with microservices, event-based architecture. We stood up, for example, Kafka's and all those things. So it replicates. Still, if one process is down, it is not bringing everything down with it. So
right,
you
right,
can still continue to do. You can have eventual consistency, and then the data is eventually flowing where it needs to be, and then user is continue their processes.
right,
Like for example, for this particular application we are talking about, if application is down, the trucks are rolling with seed. So you're losing that revenue right there in before your eyes.
Right,
So
right,
you need to have a way of collecting that information and still able to synchronize eventually. So
right, right,
some of the challenges like that, I think, were we solved it, but it took a little bit of a trial and error. Another
right,
one, which is obvious for most of the listeners, is change management, either
right,
inside change management and also quote unquote business change management, right? There
right,
are
right,
certain ways they're able to do it and want to do it, and they were doing it for years. And now the drop down is where that is supposed to be, and the drop down or a checkbox doesn't do what used to do for tens of years, if not,
right.
years together. So doing that change management now, working with them, they need to log into two different systems to complete their journey. Those kind of
Right.
things. Those were
Yeah, yeah.
challenging.
I mean, those are
But
habits also, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
but at the end of it, it is very rewarding, right? You can
Right.
look back and see, man, we accomplished something. It is a lot better
Something
than
really.
what we started with.
I mean, it's so great to know that, I know, just when you were seeing or sharing, I was just thinking this problem is so interesting to solve. And not many people go in hard on to like go and say, okay, this is an aggressive project. It will take time because everybody wants to solve the scale problem tomorrow. Okay, they
Yeah,
want a solution, but there is so much that goes into breaking a monolithic application and breaking it into a microservice that again needs to scale. I mean, you have topics that you're writing into, but that topic has to be scaled in a way and replicated in a way that you will never lose that data in an event driven
yeah.
architecture. So you have to consider all those things. So you spoke like a true veteran who has handled and solved these problems multiple times. So yeah.
I appreciate that. David, another thing we are actually working on, moving one of the monolith or legacy application to cloud. We were part of that workshops last week and before kind of a thing, right? So
Right, right,
it is. I was talking to one of the person who was part of doing the initial implementation of that particular application, right? And again, it brings millions of dollars of revenue, that particular application.
right,
And
right,
and he said, I thought it's fascinating, right? He said, hey, when we rolled out this application for the first time, we introduced mouse along with that application for the first time. And again,
wow.
it works.
Yeah,
The particular application works. But it is not scalable. It is brittle, and the talent is not there to make updates or business changes. It is difficult.
yeah.
Those are some of the reasons why we want to do it. But that being said, it is decades of knowledge and decades of
Oh, yeah.
customization you need to take and take a fresh look at it, and it takes years to redo this.
Yeah, yeah. What that reminds me of an episode, or not an episode, but a conversation I had when I was working at a company. When the company was finally changing offices. Okay, the company had been in an office location for almost 20 years, and then they were moving to a new office, a new floor, much more modern setup. And then when they were moving, they realized that under a desk there was an AS400 kept, which is like an old AS400. It was still running. Nobody knew what it did. Okay. And they were like so concerned about unplugging that because they did not know what was running on that. And we knew that it hadn't been touched for a while because whoever sat there was saying, well, it's been around for at least so many years. So you're talking about technology that's working for such a long time, and people are really wary of like, hey, do we really need to change it? Of course we need to, but just remember
Yeah,
that we were talking about the
I'm
mouse.
sure you have seen in some of those desktops and servers there are stickers, do not turn off.
Yes, yes, I have.
So
Yeah,
yeah, and people who put those stickers, I think they moved on, and
they moved.
there are certain applications people do not know what it
Yeah,
does and how it does. So you need to reverse engineer those things to redo
correct.
them. There are some
Yeah,
of those challenges.
that's how I feel sometimes when I'm talking to people who have been working on mainframe. Like it's like such a it's a great technology, but once you're on it, it's just so difficult for you to kind of think in another way, and the effort is like wild. But so going back to what you were just sharing is now at Ameren. or Ameren, your current role also entails these kind of efforts where you're trying to move legacy applications into a more modern paradigm and more modern architecture, and then these challenges still remain.
Yeah, that is right. Because we need to work very closely on various things, right? Like we talked about, do we have right talent? We
Yeah,
cannot take on multiple transformations at the same time. We need to make
right,
sure there is a right level of organizational throughput and a right level of subject matter experts and funding.
right,
And
right.
you can't throw too much change in the organization and still able to do a good job at it, right? So
Got
there
it.
are
Yeah,
multiple factors. My team works closely with the various business and digital leaders to understand how do we lay it out. That is what we
yeah.
call it as ILTP, integrated long-term planning, and we
Oh, nice.
create roadmaps and make sure, hey, we have ability to do this. Then it needs to stagger. These five things needs to go together. This needs to happen before we get to, touch on this one. Those kind of
Yeah.
things.
And that's how I think that kind of team is, well, for folks listening, is so important for you to have that kind of a team in an organization, because that then drives or connects business to the actual stories that are going to go into a release, right? And there is an alignment, and if there is no communication, that can affect and cause disaster that directly affects your revenue, right? So
That's
well,
right.
well said. I wanted to ask about, how do you look at cloud strategy, right, at Amarin? I know you're moving towards or are on cloud as well as, but what is important at Amarin now with the cloud strategies that you have? Do you get involved in conversations on what kind of solution to pick? Do you think about multi-cloud, multi-region? How do you think about that?
Yeah, so we have a cloud strategy, and recently we worked on revamping the cloud strategy. Change is the constant thing in IT, right? So,
Right, right,
uh, like I was saying before, there are four things we critically look at. One is agility. Second one is, how resilient and availability and cost effectiveness. So
right,
those are some of the pillars in a cloud strategy. We are making good progress. We have a strong team which implements DevSecOps. We have a strong team which works closely with Agile and make sure we can do these things in a way which is scalable as well
right,
as sustainable.
right, right,
And right now we are actively looking into what we call it as cloud hosting rationalization initiative.
right,
So as the name suggests, we have quite a bit of applications. We have hundreds of applications in our data center. And what we are doing is we are cataloging all of those applications and
right,
trying
right,
to understand what segment they fit in, right? Are they ready to transform into cloud application, or they need to stay back, or for various reasons, including some regulatory concerns, or we need to retire. And this is the
right,
time view, right? To
right,
transform,
right,
invest, eliminate, and those kind of a view we look into, and we try to put them into different segments. Hey, this
got it,
then we need to prioritize. This is a critical application, so maybe we need to prioritize based on the availability of resources as well as funding and so on. And this is not as important application. Probably we can just lift it and shift it, right? With a view of, hey, we are going to eliminate it in 5 years, right? So
got it. Yeah,
we
yeah,
are taking different aspects, like we call it a decision tree, and then
yeah,
we are putting them into various segments, and then we convert them into roadmaps. Now we take those applications and put a business case and put a roadmap around it. Then
right,
what is
right.
our 2 year window looks like, 4 year window, 5 year window looks like. So we have a
Nice.
view into how much of investment we need, and what is that effort going to look like, and so on.
Got it. Yeah, and that also helps you with the planning of what,
Absolutely.
talent you need, what kind of technology you're going to go dive into. So do you have like innovation teams that are focused on research early on to before you fully fledge out and plan what that looks like? Do you do that as well?
So basically, the way we're trying to do this one is we have something called pre-work or pre-implementation. We say it. So we say, hey, for example, this particular application we need to transform.
Yeah.
So we put a roadmap before. We call it pre-implementation, which
Right.
includes understanding about different opportunities or different ways of doing it, doing like a POCs or pilots, working with various SI providers, putting SOWs, vendor
Yeah.
discussions. Those are all we call it as a pre-work. Depends on size of the effort. It
Right.
may run for months or maybe a year. All right.
Yeah.
There is limited value in jumping on it without knowing all the details. Like for example, I was talking about that application, we do not know how the current system works. So
Right. Right.
we probably need to do some documentation, understanding current processes. And
Right. Right.
then we need to do some user journeys. We need to do some mappings around what is the future may look like, right? So
Got
those
it.
are all the pre-works you need to do. Probably you don't have to do at the individual story level, but at least you need to do it at the epic
The
level.
high
You
level.
need to
Yeah.
understand, and then it gives you a good view of, hey, this is my roadmap looks like. Then how
Right.
am I going to chunk it into various continuous delivery? And that is what we call it pre-implementation. And again, do all applications, do they need it? I don't know, right? Depends on the size and criticality of it. We need to carve out some dedicated deliberate effort before we jump on it.
Got it. Yeah. And I know you kind of mentioned this, but I wanted to dive into this a little bit more for folks who are listening to kind of learn a little bit. So,
Mhm.
what drives the kind of technology you choose for the transformation, right? I know you mentioned scale, but is it driven by, hey, the company is growing, we need to add more utility, so users, there's more data required. Now the experience that is required by these users is different. They want to see real time, hey, how much
Mhm.
electricity am I using, where can I save money? So what is driving the requirement for the technology that you're choosing?
Yeah, yeah, that is fantastic, right? Like I was saying before, we don't want to implement or bring in technology just for the sake of it.
Yeah.
So it needs to tie with some business justification or return on investment or some aspects of it, right? So we
Right. Yeah.
definitely need to do that. Going back to your question on what kind of technology we bring, like depends on the type of problem we are trying to solve. So, like for example, there is something called outage, right? When a big storm goes through your territory, or something of that sort happens, you need to make sure the systems can sustain large volume of data coming in.
Right.
Now
Right.
we have so many transformers and meters pumping data, or so many people are calling, and there are outage notifications you need to send. So
Yeah.
you need to have ability for that particular application or integration, because I also lead integration. So
Yeah.
now all that integration is a lot more chatty, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you need to so much of
Data
data
is
coming
moving
in.
around. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
so you need to have ability to quickly scale up,
Right.
and that is one critical component. And second component is when for whatever reason they fail, they need to come back very quickly. That is the resiliency aspect of it, right?
Right. Right. Right.
And
Right.
now you have the power is down and also your application is down. It's not a good scenario. So
Yeah.
you need
Yeah.
to make sure the outage notification is also down is not a good experience for our customers.
Right.
So you need to have fault tolerant, very resilient. So we are working towards that active, passive kind of a resiliency strategies, and
Yeah.
having a good monitoring, alerting. We're constantly improving, continuous improvement on that one. How
Yeah.
do we make things better, right? We are learning
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
certain past mistakes and make it better. We don't repeat the same thing again.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and also learning from mistakes is just so critical to, it's just a part of building a better solution, is what I feel. And when
Yeah.
you said active, active, that's the world I live in. I want everything active, active all the time. I don't want to think about disaster recovery. Like when we, Cockroach DB, right, is one of those solutions where I always felt like, why do I need a dependency in my architecture or in my design? It should be a
Hmm.
peerless infrastructure. It should be, I can write and read all the time. I don't need to just scale reads. I want to scale everything, right? And that's where I feel like these architectures and these kind of design patterns kind of make sense. And when you were saying that active, are you considering, or do you are building your applications with Kubernetes infrastructure, where self-healing, auto-healing capabilities have to built into the infrastructure and application transformations?
Yeah, there definitely, and also we have hosted in AWS and other clouds. And
Right.
we also have some SaaS products, like, we use Salesforce, we use Oracle, we use other Maximo and other. Some of them are on-prem, most of them are hosted in cloud, right?
Right.
And they, in turn, they bring some of those resiliency out of the box, right?
Right.
And all the custom solutions we have, like you just said, they run in a container with the right level of resiliency built into it. Like, for
Yeah.
example, we use MuleSoft for integration,
Okay. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they have cloud solution which has resiliency built into it, and we also use quite a few APIs on prem. So we are
Yeah.
building active active for that. So we have two data centers, and for whatever reason API is down or one particular segment is down, it automatically routes to the other active active region, so users do not even know something of this
Right.
kind happens.
Right. Right.
So it is not just to that level, right? Now we need to look into underlying database, right? It needs
Yeah.
to be active active in some shape or form. And if you're using message queues, if you're using file systems, everything needs to have that kind of a posture. So
Yeah.
the user process is able to sustain these kind of fault tolerance and having that high level of resiliency end to end.
Right. Right. Yeah. Of all the technologies you said, honestly, Oracle is the only one that I don't like. That's well, part of the reason is, and nothing because I'm working at Cockroach TV, nothing to do with that. But it's just that my personal experience with like new modern paradigms and new architectures that I'm building, I have to go in. I mean, I hate Golden Gate and designing replication that way. And I used to work at another company that had a peerless architecture, so I don't want to think about failover at all or blue green deployments, right? And
Hmm.
so that's why I started using. I use actively, technologies not just on a database level, or I try to build it in a way that we have a peerless architecture, and it's done in a way that I don't even think about disaster recovery, or rather, only thing I think about is making sure I replicate the data to maybe another region and keep it there just in case my region is not available. Like that's the
Hmm.
max, but I don't want to get involved in like Golden Gate and things like that. So except for Oracle, I love everything else that you said.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? If you keep that problem outside and it is solved already, so you don't have to solve it again, right? Why
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
reinvent the wheel if it is given to you already, right?
Exactly.
So
Also, Oracle is just so expensive. It's
yeah,
just
yeah, I hear you.
that's how, maybe we need to have a different conversation after this call. But I think what you said, I mean, there is so many amazing insights that you shared about just the design pattern itself that you have to consider when you're thinking about scale, right? And it's great to know that even utility companies, and not, I mean, we talk about amazing stuff that Uber is doing, amazing stuff that
Hmm.
Twitter is doing, or say, DoorDash, all these modern new companies. But we have to realize that these patterns and these transformations are happening within companies who are Fortune 500, like Ameren, that have been historically known for building, monolithic applications and things like that. So I'm really glad that somebody like you is sharing that perspective with, the listeners here. So that's great to know.
Yeah, yeah. So the user expectations are gradually going up, right? Like
Yeah.
you just pointed out, either it is Amazon of the world, or now it is X, not a Twitter, I guess. So
It's
X
X
of the
now, yeah.
world,
X of the world,
and
yeah.
are you Ubers of the world. So when users like you and me, when we are using those services, when then we go to a power company and use their website, your expectations are the same.
Right.
So we need to meet those, and we, if not exceed. So
Yeah, yeah.
we are doing all these transformations, we are doing doubling down on these technologies where they're applicable. And Ameren is in top quartile when it comes to customer satisfaction, so
Nice.
we do that every year. And we got awards from TDI, the customer satisfaction. We are in
Katie
top
Power and
quartile, and that is very, what they say is re enforcing that we are going in the right path, and we are,
that's
providing to our customers what they're looking for.
right, right. And you were talking about this whole idea of, like, looking at resiliency, of course, is important to you, right? But at the same time, how do you look at the whole build versus buy, right? I mean, there is a lot of
Hmm.
things that you can I mean, and you're in a position where you have to at least highlight, talk, or make decisions around, hey, this is something we need to buy. Why do we build and put engineering effort into
Yeah.
something versus when something already exists, right? So how do you get into, give me an example of that, as well as how do you think about those problems? Yeah.
Sure. See, our we have our decision tree or mantra, right? The way we try to do it is the emphasis is to go to cloud, and if there is an exception, that's fine. But the default, quote unquote, is why not cloud, right?
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
the first one. And also why we need to custom build when we can buy it. And utilities, there are quite a few utilities in states and maybe hundreds of utilities if you add all the countries in the world. So in many ways the problem is already solved, right? So we go that route of, hey, can we just bring a solution which is like a SaaS solution? That is the route we try to take.
Right. Right.
In some niche areas where we probably need to do custom build, right?
Right.
Um, and going back to your question on, hey, example of it, right? We recently implemented ERP.
Oh
And
yeah.
I think that is a good example where I don't know how much value it is for you to custom build a ERP.
The
And
system.
the
Yeah.
same, we have a lot of Maximo is one of the examples, right, where we have a lot of utilities use it, and I think some non-utilities use it as well. So limited value building that kind of a functionality and custom build. So wherever it makes sense, bring a best possible industry leading solution and try to make it as a cloud hosted SaaS solution if possible. And
Right.
so that's where we get into a lot of challenges around integration. We need to
Hmm.
now have a robust plumbing to connect
Right.
all the data
All.
coming in from various clouds and SaaS solutions and also on-prem solutions. And how do you make all of this work and do not make it as a single point of failure? Imagine your plumbing gets choked. Now you have everything else working, but no water flowing, right? So that is something very critical for us, and we double down on making sure we have right level of emphasis on integration.
So I wanted to ask you, when you were saying that, is that you have all of these things that you have to do transformation. How do you like vet out which technology makes sense for this?
Mhm.
Like there has to be a vetting process, right? As to, do you have you built that into your engineering practice or your architectural process, principal process that you have built?
We have quite a few patterns established and we have
Okay.
standards established. We have a process, we call it technology work assessment. So
Right.
TWA. So any new application or any new product, when it comes through, it has to go through that process. We
Right.
add bunch of requirements. They're not always just architectural requirements. We give architectural requirements, data requirements, resiliency requirements, as well as cyber requirements. We
Right.
provide those and then we weigh them based on that. It has
Got
to
it.
fit those particular requirements. And also we add in patterns. Hey, you need to have single sign on, for example,
Right.
right?
Right.
So it is weighed based on those criterias. And then we try our best effort to meet all the requirements. In some cases, you need to throw in an exception, right?
Hmm.
For certain reasons, like, there is a regulatory reason or a time bound reason you need to get something done, you come back and adjust it later. So
Got it. Yeah.
there is a vetting process before we bring some SOWs or something like that, or procure a tool or a technology. We go through that vetting process, and it is
Got it.
effective so far.
Yeah, and the idea is that the process should enable innovation, but rather than slow it down, it's something that
That's right.
you're also thinking about. Okay, yeah,
I,
very
I,
good.
I agree, and that is why, going back to our previous conversation a little bit, we need to provide good guardrails. That way,
Yeah,
people know, hey, this. I understand. I just don't jump off and add no authentication and create a huge cyber risk, or
right.
I expose all my data. But if you
Yeah,
provide that kind of a guardrail, I think it gives a lot of liberty for folks to innovate.
yeah,
And that being said, you need to constantly check and adjust if your guardrails are in a well placed location or not, or you need
right,
to move them around and make sure it aligns with what's happening in the ground.
right. Oh, that's brilliant. Yeah, I wanted to ask, where does Kishore go for keeping himself updated with all the technology wildness that's going on. I mean, here's why I'm asking that question. 15 years ago, you had like
Uh-huh.
100 softwares that you need to pick and you need to aware about, okay, and you would hear about it in conversations. And now we have 10,000 solutions. Almost software is like every cloud company has the same or similar solutions on their platform. Then there are third party SaaS products who are also solving this. And then there are all those other people who are innovating in the open source space. So how do you, Kishore, like keep up with all of that? And you're in a position where you have to be like, well, somebody says something, you're like, at least I should know about it. What do you do?
Yeah, to be honest with you, there are a lot of key buzzwords. I still need to be a little bit reactive.
Right.
I need to go and find out what they mean, because they're a little bit contextual also, right?
Right.
So I agree, it's a constant learning.
Yeah.
I think one of the areas I go into is Gartner.
Gotcha.
We
Okay.
go there for research and try to understand what is the quadrant they are in, and some of the we try to do some little bit of research there before we
Right.
feel comfortable. And it needs to be, we set up some analyst calls and try to understand what is the industry trends. And there are some industry consortiums. For
Yeah.
example, EPRI is an industry consortium. We
Okay.
have some forums there. We go there and understand, hey, if any similar utility has done something like this, or what are the industry trends happening,
Right.
um, and some SIs, like Accentures of the world, Deloitte's of the world. They also bring their perspective of what's happening in the industry, all other
Right.
implementations they're doing. And last but not least, I started using ChatGPT and Bard, Google Bard, and
Yeah.
yeah, they give a good perspective too. Obviously, you need to take it with a grain of salt, but
Yeah.
that is an interesting new space to go as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think one of the biggest things that when you just said it suddenly hit my mind is that uh, I was talking to somebody else about it as well. It's like there's so many papers that are getting released, right? Research papers. And sometimes you feel like I don't have time to read 30 paper or research paper to get that knowledge. Now you can pull that into ChatGPT or Word, and it condenses it down, and you have enough information there for you to have an executive conversation with somebody, or have a conversation with your architect around, hey, why don't we look at this as an idea of implementing
Good.
something, right? So I do
Yeah,
feel
yeah.
like it's very helpful. I'm doing that myself. And I feel I'm glad to know that people in your position are also feeling that's something valuable for you to try. So that's good.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. That's why it got 100 million users in 2 days or something. That's what they said, right?
It
Uh,
did. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think it definitely has value on how to use it, but you need to double check and validate. I think
Correct. Yeah.
that is where it is right now.
Yeah. And one of the ways I really do it is I will ask the same prompt on ChatGPT. I will ask it on 3.5, 4, as well as on Bard. And the difference really is the output, the output from intelligence, or the way it makes me feel. GPT-4 does a great job, but it doesn't have internet data, unless because they had the browser plugin available and they took it off because of an issue. But Bard gives me more realistic timeline. And so I agree with you. Like validation is the biggest factor when it comes to AI LLMs. So
Meaning they're still maturing, right? We need
yeah,
to give them a little bit of a slack. They're working on it, I
correct,
assume.
correct. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm assuming, because I'm paying $20 just for that internet plugin.
That is for the Chat GPT-4, isn't it?
GPT-4, yeah, and I use a few plugins as well. Like I use the PDF plugin. I also personally use the Instacart plugin, which I feel is a great use case where we make our meal plans on Instacart. So what we do is we
Okay.
ask GPT to produce a meal plan for us, and then I bring the Instacart plugin. It creates all the ingredients I need for the week, and just we
Hmm.
just order it directly from TomTom or an Aldi.
Oh,
So that,
that's awesome.
yeah, that's a
Yeah,
pretty practical use case. So
yeah, I'll tell you one more practical use case which I recently did. We
yeah,
went to Iceland for vacation,
yeah,
and then
yeah.
I went to one of these region AIs and said, "Hey, create itinerary for me,"
There
and
you
it
go.
did for multiple days. And
Yeah,
I tweaked it a little bit here and there, and it worked. I
yeah,
just used that itinerary.
exactly. I mean, the way I see these is like it's enabling us to save time and to refocus that time towards something that might need more attention, and I
Hmm.
for and somebody like me, and I feel like you, who wants to save time and make the time more valuable, I think definitely is a place to uh, invest in that
Oh,
$20.
agree. I think we all become like a region AI experts very soon.
Yeah, I think so. I think we will be. Well, I know we are getting towards the end of our, podcast, and I mean, first of all, some of the things you shared is prospectively so important for folks to consider when they are moving from legacy and re-architecting everything for a modern, architecture, or an, agile thought process or microservice and things like that. For companies who are, or folks who are trying to build infrastructure like this, or looking to move in this direction, what is your advice to them, and what would be your, I know you've already mentioned a few things, but what do you want to say that this is what you have to stick to kind of make sure that you don't make those mistakes that probably you have made in the process, so.
Oh yeah, everybody has scars in the back, right? For
Yeah, yeah,
sure. I think it is not just a technology problem. I think that is what I probably emphasize again. It is
yeah,
a people, process, technology. You need to look through all three lenses. I
yeah,
think making an assumption that technology only can solve everything is probably a pitfall, right? You need to
right.
make sure, like we talked about, do you have right level of skills from the people perspective, and how do you upskill them, or you
Yeah,
need to go to somewhere and get augment right skill set. Do we have right level of subject matter experts in technology and also in the business process, and do we have a product mindset if that's what you're looking for, and are you able to take that big piece of delivery and can you chunk it into smaller pieces and show success, show delivery, continuous progress and value? Are you able to realize that value as soon as possible? So I think you need to look through all three
all of
lenses.
those,
i
yeah.
think I think technology in many ways is easier problem to solve in a corporation than people and process
Yeah,
perspective.
yeah.
That's what I would recommend and encourage people to take a look when you're embarking into this, and take one step at a time. You don't have to do the whole thing like a big bang approach. It is not usually the best way to do it.
That was great advice for folks listening in. Kishore's, is active on LinkedIn. I think that's one of the places where people can follow you. Is there any other place that you recommend people can connect with you or like learn from you in terms of material that you post or repost,
Yeah,
that you
LinkedIn is
want
the
to share?
best way, and happy to collaborate with folks and learn from them as well as I can provide my thoughts as well. Happy to do that.
Thank you so much for being so candid and for all the amazing ideas that you shared on the Big Ideas in App Architecture podcast. It has been a pleasure to have you here, and again, I appreciate it.
Thank you, David. I can't thank you enough for hosting me, and thank you for this opportunity. Thank you, and good luck with you.